Okay, welcome back, everybody. So today we have the pleasure to host Victoria, and Victoria is an ex-SCAD student. She graduated in 2017. She now works for Naughty Dog, and she previously, so when she was at SCAD, she was part of a very fun group that made a game that was called TSA Frisky, which I had the pleasure to have in my Studio 2 and Studio 3, and that ended up representing SCAD at the E3 college game competition. They also shipped TSA Frisky on the Oculus Rift, on the Vive. They made a super fun little website. And so today, Victoria is going to talk about QA. And so Victoria, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Law. Like Cyril said, I graduated in 2017. And after graduating, I immediately moved out to LA, and I've been working here ever since. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen if that's okay. Okay. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about what quality assurance is, what we do in the industry, and kind of my path from graduating to getting here. When I was at SCAD, I worked on 3 different games during my classes, made 2 game jam games, and I really liked to design and make art, but my strong suit was kind of keeping up on my documents. So, make sure you work on your sprints and your backlogs and keep them up to date, because it is incredibly useful for you later on. When I graduated, I applied it as a 3D generalist and QA tester to various positions. It took a while for me to get hired. I don't want you to be discouraged if it takes some time. But I also want you to make sure to remember to stay busy while you're waiting for more job opportunities. As I was doing all these applications, sending them out, I kept in mind my other options, like film production, retail, food service. For a while, I was working unpaid film jobs, which kind of sucked, but I got food, and eventually I started getting paid. And I made sure that when I came out here, I had some emergency money in case it took a while for me to start getting paid work. Few months later, it wasn't until January that I was able to get my email for my first bug test. And then I passed the bug test and was interviewed. And eventually I got into Square Enix for my first job, which was Localization Qa. The project was Dragon Quest XI for the PS4. And it lasted about 6 months. After that, I had to go on a contract break. But they were really happy with my work on Dragon Quest XI, so they asked me back for their next project, Kingdom Hearts 3. That one lasted a little bit as well, but I started feeling like there were too many gaps between my projects, and so I was looking for more work. I was getting good reviews, work wasn't challenging, and I wanted to... Sorry, it's a little hard to see. Let me move this real quick. I wanted longer projects. While you're working and while you're between jobs, I want you guys to keep eyes on other job offers constantly. Don't allow yourself to get comfortable in one place if you're no longer growing. So you might be wondering what a bug test is like. For a localization job, it's kind of similar to a grammar test. It'll focus on text audio issues rather than functionality. So you're going to want to make sure your spelling skills are very good and such. Regular bug tests, you'll be sitting in a room with other testers, applicants. You'll be given a level from early in development, and you'll need to find and efficiently log as many bugs as you can in a period of time. Localization QA is a great place for people to start out. The project turnover is a little high. Most bugs focus on text and audio stuff, and tricky functionality stuff is usually rare, especially for projects that have already shipped overseas, like Dragon Quest XI was for me. Most of the tools are stuff that you already have access to, so it won't be super hard to transition into the new job for the first time. It's a lot of Microsoft Office suite related stuff. The only things that you might be unfamiliar with are bug databases and basic video editing software. Regular QA, we're in charge of playing the game as many times and as many different ways as possible. Sometimes we do this start to finish. Sometimes we do it in smaller chunks. Sometimes you might be in charge of a level and you'll be playing it every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. I definitely lost count of how many times I platinumed The Last of Us Part 2. You're also going to be, during these playthroughs, you're going to be looking for bugs and tracking them in a database throughout the dev cycle. You're going to have these bugs marked fixed, and then you're going to have to make sure that they're fixed, or they might get sent back needing more information. And then you'll need to provide more information for the person it's been assigned to. Your managers might give you test plans for checking various parts of the game or making sure that you guys are ready for your sprints and milestones. Did someone come in or? Oh, okay. You're gonna be, sometimes you're gonna be running plans created by other people, your managers, and then sometimes you're going to be trusted to make plans for both yourself or other people to run as well. You're going to be creating resources for other department uses, for your own department uses. You're also going to be taking responsibility for the quality of a level or a system or etc. in the game. During Last of Us Part 2, I started out owning one of the later levels in the game. So I was playing that level every single day, making sure that the bugs with it were resolved or logged in the database. And later on, I ended up also owning the weapons and the weapon system in the game. And I was also one of several people on the combat and AI testing teams. And we also placed pickups throughout the game. Another thing that we do is called development support, and I'll get to that more later on in the presentation. Again, a lot of the tools that we use are either the Google suite or the Microsoft suite. We have a few in-house proprietary tools. We use the engine. We use various video capture software. We might occasionally dabble with Maya, Photoshop, or Visual Studio, depending on what sort of development support we're providing. Perforce, etc. Okay. One of the examples of development support that we provide is Nav Mesh and Visibility. Basically, Nav Mesh is used for AI pathing and other systems in the game. For our team, we ended up using it for one of our robust accessibility features, which I'll talk more about later. And I've got a link for Nav Mesh and UE4 if you want to read more into it later. For visibility, this system determines what levels the player can see from where they're currently standing, which is great for performance optimization. And if you want to read more about that, I have a link to that as well. I mentioned earlier that some of us were placing pickups in the game. So every single rag, binding, blade, whatever that you would pick up and use for crafting, those were hand placed by several of us on the team. And we had to make sure that the items were balanced for difficulty across all difficulties. I have here an example of what an item balancing sheet looks like. This is just an example, and then we would have different columns for keeping track of the different difficulties. I mentioned before that we had some system, oh, sorry. Our accessibility system, which was basically for players that needed other systems in order to play the game on similar ground as other people. Basically, we were checking and adjusting the accessibility mechanics and settings throughout the game. Let me go ahead and show you. So this system, it relies on our Nav Mesh system. By having accurate Nav Mesh and making sure items were placed close enough to the Nav Mesh that it can be read, blind players were able to use the controls to find items in the environment just with sound alone. We had to make sure that all items were properly being read by this system. And if there were cases where it wasn't, then we would go in and fix it ourselves rather than making a programmer or designer do that. This also meant that we had to do like a lot of playthroughs where we would personally like put a blindfold on and go through the game and make sure we can find everything and make sure that the combat cues were correct with the accessibility features. There's some more examples of development support that I've heard of at other companies or that might have been at Naughty Dog during The Last of Us Part 2. It ranges from studio to studio, but I can confirm that they're normal for most studios. Some people might tag collision with surface types, so player interactions produce the correct effects, the visual effects, like when the particles produce like stone when you shoot rock, and also the sound is the correct sound for a gun hitting stone rather than an incorrect sound. Some people adjust UI elements. Maybe they are given stuff to work with, or they're asked to make something new based on the rest of the game. So effects adjustments, rebuilding animations, adjusting quest NPC dialogue, unpicking suitable animations from a library. Some people make drawings for environment art. Like if you go through a level and you see a bunch of hand drawings on the wall, usually that's someone at the studio that's drawn that and put that in. Or maybe it's like a family member has provided a drawing for them to use. Providing handwriting or family photos. Every single collectible note in The Last of Us Part 2 is actually the handwriting from someone at the studio that's provided a sample. Providing text suggestions for collectibles or chat filler for usage in game. Another collectible series in The Last of Us Part 2 is that little trading card set. Those were all suggestions from random people in the studio of little superhero characters that they wanted to see in the game. The main takeaways that I want you to get out of this presentation, whether you go into QA or not, is I want you guys to take care of yourself. You can't keep working if you're exhausted or injured, no matter how cool you are. You need to take your breaks. It's going to add up. It's okay to not immediately have a job lined up by graduation. No one's actually timing you. And if they are, that's a little weird. You need to be able to allow yourself to do things in a normal amount of time. And I don't want you to compare yourselves to others. Things might feel a little lonely for you after you graduate. Right now, you're in an environment where it's like you're surrounded by so many people, talking to them, so many people normally. I know COVID's made things a little weird. And some of them might go off and do their own thing after college. And it's going to feel like you're surrounded by way less people. But you need to understand that it's just that there's less people around you now, and you can take some time to figure out who you are outside of being a student. You know, try and figure out what your hobbies are, go do other events that aren't related to your work. There's a difference between being disciplined and being hard on yourself. I want you guys to actively train yourselves to recognize the difference, or, you know, seek help if it's difficult. it's going to be a lot better for your progress if you're being reasonable when you critique yourself. I want you guys to apply for QA positions. If you guys see yourself in QA at all, it can be a great experience and you might enjoy it more than you'd think. I know other departments are really cool, but if you want to see the game, then QA ends up playing and seeing the game way more than any other department. I know a lot of other departments only stay in their level and they don't see the rest of the game until it's finished, which is a bit disappointing, but I also want you guys to get along with your teammates or your coworkers. You don't really have to like everyone, but I want you guys to try and be respectful. You all have the same goal, and this translates to both being a student and working in the industry. Right now, you're in groups with a whole bunch of people, and you might have some different personalities, and it's tough. But end of the day, I still want you guys to try and work together towards the same goal. You never know who's going to be your coworker in the future too. I ended up working with someone at SCAD actually immediately after graduation at Square Enix, so that was a lot of fun because we got along together really well. If it's important to you, I want you guys to keep trying. You know, some people apply a few times after graduation, and then when they don't get a response immediately, they give up and go to do something else. I don't want you guys to have to do that unless like it's something that you've decided that you wanted. If it's not making you happy like it used to, like you thought it would, there's nothing wrong with trying something different. But really, just like if you want something bad enough, keep trying, don't give up. Find something to distract yourself in the meantime, like kind of what I did with film jobs and stuff. Keep yourself busy, make sure you have an income, but keep applying to the job that you want. And if it doesn't work, find another route. Keep growing, keep trying to get as much information for yourself as possible. It's okay to like a job because you like the people you work with, but if your managers can only do so much for you. A company can't love you and care for you. You have to do that for yourself. Constantly evaluate yourself, constantly see how you're doing. Don't be afraid of trying new things, because that's how I went from working at Square Enix, which I really loved, and I really liked working with all those people. But now I'm working at Naughty Dog and I get to do so much more stuff, and I have so many more privileges, and it's a lot better for me. Okay, Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? I might not be able to answer them all right now, but I can jot them down and ask later if they're able to be answered, if it pertains more to Naughty Dog.
I had a quick question about the localization QA you did.
Yeah.
I was just, because I've never actually heard of it before until now. So was it like you got kind of like stuff that had been localized already, and then you kind of like went through it to see like if it was correct, essentially?
Yes. So let's see. The projects end up being at like different stages of development by the time you get them, so it'll vary, but basically they're already translated or in the process of translating it, and as those sections come in, you go through the text and check and make sure that everything's accurate.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, really fun, especially if you're new to game development stuff. It's a great way to get into the industry and like get used to how things work.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. I'm really glad I learned about that now.
Oh yeah, and if you guys want suggestions for localization stuff to apply to, I can send you guys links of convenient localization departments that I know about.
Oh yeah, that'd be really cool actually.
Absolutely.
That'd be fantastic.
Awesome.
I have a question. So when you were saying for when you were working with Naughty Dog that you were doing some other things like placing and balancing pickups, was that something that they were like, okay, we need the QA testers to do that? Or was it more like, hey, we're looking for people to do this. Does anyone want to do that?
In the past, it was
like
normal
within
for
their group.
Yeah. In the past, it was normal for that department to do it. They've done it on previous projects, so they were kind of continuing that trend of, hey, this worked well last time, let's do it again. Let's give it to this group of people because it makes sense for them to check it while checking their other things. So for our case, we were working on combat, and we were also working a lot with the accessibility stuff. So it was normal for us to do it in order to balance combat and other things. But it might change from project to project, of course.
Right.
Does that answer it?
Yes.
Cool,
I was
cool.
kind of, it was a little shocking, like when you were saying like all the other things that you got to do that was kind of fun. Was
Exactly. Yeah.
what, like, from your experience with the 2 different QA testing for 2 different companies, was there stuff like that you experienced before Naughty Dog?
You mean at Square Enix?
Yes, at Square Enix. Like, did you, was it just like bug finding and tracking, or were there other fun things that you got to do on that team?
So
I
for
think
the
that
most
it was
part,
just Naughty Dog.
yeah, for the most part at localization, there's less freedom for doing that stuff because you're not working directly with the designers. You're only working with the localization department. But for Square Enix, it's common for people to work on ESRB videos or game guides. I got to work on the ESRB video for both Dragon Quest XI and Kingdom Hearts 3. And those aren't something that like gets distributed to the public or anything. It's just for our internal use of making sure the ratings get put onto the game properly. So basically, like, you go through the game and then you find all the things that are like, oh, this is alcohol, oh, this is swearing, oh, this is violent behavior, and you make sure those things are noted for the ratings board so they can like quickly judge what the tag is.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, like, to kind of bounce on what Julie was saying, it seems that there is a fair amount of cross-disciplinary tasks that happen in QA. And some of them, in your mention, some of them were like kind of maybe more dealing with scripting. Some of them were more dealing with animation. Some of them were more dealing with art and things like that.
Yes.
For someone that is interested in kind of like making a foray in QA, what would be the lateral skills that you would recommend? So like, okay, you need to be organized, you need to know your Excel, you need to know your spreadsheets and things like that.
Yes.
But like, for example, if you dabble in 3D asset creation, is that something that you can surface on your resume to show the company and say, hey, I can do that on top of it?
Absolutely.
Or light scripting, how do you present that for an interview? How do you package yourself as like, well, I am interested in QA, but I'm going to be a great asset because I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. Like, how would you advise students to kind of like approach this?
So I did this on my resume a little bit, and I think a lot of the students are already doing this as well. Just whenever you have those skills sections, you can list that you know these software programs, and that quickly gives them a look into that. And then on your portfolio, when you do your project devlogs and such, you can show the things that you did on those projects to help fortify that. And it really helps when they, for example, we were talking about how people have different roles, like points of contacts, like maybe someone's a UI person. If someone is really good at drawing and really good at making UI elements, perhaps they'll be more favored to fill the role of the UI person if that spot ever gets cleared. And then they can get asked for things like dev support and providing those things.
What is the lateral skill that you think is the most lacking? Meaning that when you see like all the people that are in QA, what do you think companies wish they see more of? Like, do they want people that know how to script? Do they want people to know how to model, to do UI? Like, is there a particular niche that students could explore if they are interested in QA?
Feel like scripting is typically highly coveted by most departments. It's just a really useful skill to have. Other things, it's like, you know, 3D modeling is good to know, and maybe you could get asked for something, but that's probably still typically going to be handled more by the environment artists, depending on which studio it is.
Okay.
scripting is good. Project management is good. The more you know Excel and making good spreadsheets that can be used for everyone, the more useful you are to the whole department.
Okay. And so more questions. I mean, I don't want to kind of monopolize. If you guys have questions, you have the priority. You know that, right?
I do. I actually have a question, if that's all right. So I'm curious, what types of things do you guys look to put on your defect reports? Like what's most important to, like, what's the most important information to include on those?
It's going to vary depending on what type of the issue it is. First and foremost, the issues need to be like clearly stated. The steps need to be written like as precisely as possible without going overboard. You'll get a feel of what the person you're assigning the bug to needs over time, but still sometimes the person might be newer, so maybe you need to be a bit more thorough in listing literally every step. We also have debug tools, various things in the game that you can visualize to show how the system is working so that they can quickly just look at a screenshot and be like, oh, that thing right there is what's broken because this QA knows that this is the debug I usually like to have up when I'm fixing these issues.
Okay. And do you guys do a lot of regression testing?
Yes, every day of our lives.
Well, why don't you explain what a regression test is?
So I was talking earlier about when the issue, you log an issue and it's in the database and maybe it gets marked fixed. So you need to go back, look at the issue, use your steps, maybe try different steps to make sure that the issue doesn't still occur after it's been marked fixed. And if it still occurs, you send it back to the person. If it's fixed, you can close out the issue. Another type of regression, though, is just called stagnant regression. So basically, if something's been in the database for a while, maybe no one's looking at it, you need to go and make sure, hey, yeah, this issue is still occurring. And you'll note issue still occurs this date on this build. And then if it seems like a more critical issue, maybe you talk to someone like, hey, this has been in the database for a while. Should we move it to someone else? And then that can get looked at. Basically, it keeps things from being buried in the database with no one looking at it.
I have a question kind of based off of that. What programs do you guys usually use for like bug tracking and like the databases? And like do you
Go for it.
I was saying, like, is it worth kind of like looking into like learning these programs kind of like now, or is kind of just you kind of learn as you go into the job?
It can be both. They're not super unwieldy to learn at first on your own if you're completely new to it. It's more important that you know how to clearly label things. Like, for example, the bug test that I was given, we just wrote on pen and paper if we wanted to, but they also gave us the option to write directly into the database.
Nice.
Either one is good. Either one is suitable. It doesn't prevent you from getting hired.
Okay.
It's not impossible to start looking at it though now. There's a lot of different databases that are used, but one that's like pretty commonly used is like Jira or DevTrack. Some of these things require money to get, and you might not really want to spend money on playing around with a bug database. So what I might recommend is going to YouTube and looking up how these databases work, because plenty of people give talks on that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Another question.
Yes.
I'm sure that everybody is thinking about it, but nobody's daring asking. I mean, at least for a while, I don't know if it's still the case, but for a while, QA was really the royal way into AAA Studios for people that wanted to be either coders or designers. That means that very few companies would hire designers at a design position. They would hire at a QA position, and then potentially would kind of like after a certain time spent in QA, these people would naturally flow into the design department or the code department. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Is there something that you want to talk about concerning that topic, like perspectives of evolution while you're QAing? How does that happen? How is it handled? Do you have like stories? Can you share stories?
I can go into giving a few examples. It's still the case, and you're going to find this as you look for job positions. If you try to look for game designer, they're going to do that thing where it's like needs 2 or more years of experience, already doing shipping AAA titles on this many things. And it's like, who has that? I'm graduating. I only have my student projects, which you're probably maybe not going to consider. I feel like I know at least 5 people. Wait, maybe it's more, 3 people from SCAD that went into QA and eventually got into design. It's pretty common to see. I know a lot of people that have done that for multiple departments, but again, design too. Basically, by playing the game as much as you do, you get the best seat to see how all the designers do different things, and you get to be more comfortable and aware of their design principles that they kind of hold highly. I might not be the I can say that maybe dev support might be a good way for also being considered to move from QA to design. I might ask someone else if they want to talk about this a little.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's already plenty helpful. One more questions, portfolio-wise. I know, I mean, I'm not tooting my own, but I know I'm always insisting for students to have like pretty lengthy write-ups or like breakdowns of their projects. Do you believe that that's something that is particularly interesting if you are applying for a QA position? Do they want to read you talk about your process, or is it at that point they don't really care?
I think so. When I first applied, my bosses did mention how they looked at my portfolio and they liked my write-up for the TSA Frisky game, and they thought it was a really fun looking game. So they definitely look at that stuff, and it might be something that they consider of, this person conveys themselves clearly. That's a good quality for a bug tester. We want that.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? I have, since we have two people from 2 different QA departments and two different companies, Alex, is there like something that is different with you guys?
Sort of. So we are software QA, and I guess what she's mainly been talking about is games QA. And so I think the day-to-day is definitely a lot different, but a lot of what she talked about is very similar to what I've experienced at Epic. I think the only thing that I would say is at Epic for our engine QA, we are more likely to encourage you to stay on QA instead of putting you into a design position. I'm not sure if I can really speak to what it's like for Fortinet QA. That might be different, but we're more likely to encourage you to stick around and keep working on the engine with us.
And so that's actually a good thing. So if you are staying in QA, what are the perspectives of evolution within that job? Like, I mean, what are the steps, the levels? I mean, I would assume that you have like senior testers, but then does it you mentioned briefly, Victoria, kind of like writing test plans and things like that. Is that something, for example, that more accomplished, more experienced testers are going to do, and they are going to have a team of testers that are going to kind of like shoulder kind of a particular aspect of the game, like you were mentioning, weapon, combat, etc. And so what does evolution inside a QA department looks like? Like for the entry level to kind of like 5 years plus?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good example. While I was in the combat team, it was about 5 of us being overseen by another QA tester at the time. She was constantly making test plans for us, and it was going really well. So eventually she did get promoted to a senior QA analyst, which meant that she was a permanent hire, and then she gets like the same benefits as the rest of the company. On that track, a QA tester that becomes like a QA analyst could eventually be on the line for like managing the whole department for a project, or also being like the main QA director who oversees all the managers on all the projects.
Okay. Is there can you explicit the difference between a tester and an analyst? I mean, I assume that an analyst has a little bit more reporting to do.
Yeah, it's going to vary from company to company, but on our company, the testers are more contractors who are mostly finding bugs, and maybe they do step up and occasionally do things like make test plans until maybe eventually they get hired for the analyst position.
Okay.
So testers are more self-managing and analysts are more self and other people managing.
So would you say that an analyst has a team of testers and then they are going to kind of like crunch the numbers, make reporting charts on like how many bugs are being fixed, et cetera, et cetera?
It might vary, but typically yes, especially if they're like more senior analysts.
One more question that I have. You mentioned Agile. How integrated are you at the QA level? Are you kind of like in Agile teams at the QA level, or are you kind of integrated with small development teams? Like how integrated is QA within the overall company Agile process?
Pretty heavily. I feel like it's not like it's not super in your face, but the overall idea is embedded in all the test planning that you do. Everything is based around the milestones and the sprints and then stability checks that you do.
So do you have QA teams that are testing prototypes or that are testing kind of like early builds, or do QA tends to be involved more towards the end, like closer to shipping dates? I mean, I assume that, of course, the closer we get to shipping, the more QA departments are involved. But how early do you guys get integrated? Like, do some of you kind of get to play like some very, very, very early builds or very, very early iterations?
Yes, more so for like small systems of things when they're trying to test a new system that's going into the game. They might throw one or several people at it to check it out before it's ready for full integration. Not so much like early project stuff, but definitely I'd say like maybe when stuff starts entering like beautiful corner and like early alpha, but not necessarily like unplayable.
Okay. And would you say that for the teams that are involved with the earlier versions of the project, these become more designer friendly? Like as a QA, you get more back and forth between designers and QA and more suggestions and things like that. And as opposed to when you are completely towards the end, where there is not that much room to iterate, or is it absolutely not relevant?
Not necessarily. It's more important for QA to develop strong relationships with their designers and for the designers to trust what the QA is saying. Then they might start asking for feedback on these things, but overall, they're mostly still doing what they're planning on doing. But the feedback process is really important. I know I got asked a lot of stuff on weapons during The Last of Us Part 2 in terms of tuning things.
Okay.
Same thing for combat as well. Oh, sorry.
Okay. It's okay. Guys, come on, don't let me do the whole talking. I'm sure you have questions.
I have a question for, I guess, both QA people in here. Because I know a lot of QA work is contract, and I was just thinking, like, are you guys right now like on a contract, or is it like a more permanent position?
Is it cool if I go first?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, right now I'm still technically considered a contract, and I talked about that a little bit earlier. Contracts for localization companies tend to be shorter, and you will go on a lot more breaks between stuff versus stuff for regular QA. The contract breaks are usually shorter depending on how the company functions. And the projects are a lot longer since you're starting at an earlier point in development than shipping and localization. But you're still going to have to eventually go on contract breaks unless they hire you full time or find some other workaround.
Yeah, for me, I've been on contract for a year and a half. Typically they have like a year contract, but it's not uncommon for that to be extended, especially if you prove your worth. Actually next week I will be starting my full-time position with Epic, so.
Nice. Congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats. Awesome. Anybody else? Any remaining?
I think it was, I'm going to go off like that of contracts for QA. Is it a possibility, or is it something that's ever happened where you finish a contract on QA and the company goes to another project or another game? Would they go to you first? You know, would they email you or contact you saying, hey, we have a new opportunity in QA for you if you're interested, since you've already worked and been with the company already?
Absolutely. I even did that at Square Enix as well. Before we even finished Kingdom Hearts 3, I got asked by my managers like, hey, we're going to do a small project. Are you available for doing this port of Final Fantasy IX? And I was like, yeah, I'm sure. I'm still available. So I basically didn't leave the office for that period of time. But then I went on contract break after that project.
Cool. Yeah, thank you there. Yeah, that's good to know.
Anybody else?
I have a question. It was kind of already answered earlier, but I feel like I should just ask it again. Is there anything that you wish you could have done in the past to better prepare yourself for being in these QA positions, or even going forward to different roles?
If you want to prepare yourself for a QA position, or if that's something that you just want to be ready for just in case you don't get a job right off the bat, I think at the start of this meeting, you guys mentioned that you guys were in like Studio 2, Studio 3. Definitely practice reporting your own bugs in your games. You can build like a Trello or something like that. You want to practice making sure that you have very clear steps to reproduce the issue, so that you know, if somebody who's not familiar with the game needs to reproduce the issue, all they have to do is just follow those steps. Make sure you have clear screenshots, and probably not relevant, but we always like to include logs on ours in case it's, you know, there's a crash that you need to kind of dissect. You can go into the logs and take a look at that information.
Definitely agree with that. Logging all your stuff is an incredibly useful skill to have, especially when you start going into those practice bug tests for whatever company. That and being as familiar with all the project documents and management and the engine as you can. The more you know those things, the easier it is to be aware of the issues that are happening on the project.
That's actually, did that answer your question, Nusa?
Yeah, that was super helpful.
I'd like to bounce a little bit on that. Naughty Dog uses a custom engine. How did you feel that your transition from kind of like looking at Unreal and understanding how Unreal functions at an engine level versus how what their engine does and the capabilities of that engine and what may be causing bugs in that engine as opposed to Unreal? Like, did you feel like there was a smooth kind of transition? Things are not that different, or is it like actually night and day, and you have to kind of like relearn or learn how their particular engine works, what are the quirks, etc. Like, what are the differences and similarities that you witnessed at both levels? And I assume that for Alex, the question is very different because he's still with Unreal.
Yes, it was a very, very nice and smooth transition. All the basic principles that you learn in other systems like Unreal or even Maya translate, at least in my case, translated very well to Naughty Dog's game engine. So when they asked me to do dev support stuff like the pickups or other things, I already kind of knew the basic idea of how to do those things, and they didn't have to spend as much time teaching me.
Okay, so they have like something similar to blueprinting.
Yes.
Like they have like the same types of options, even though they may not be one-to-one, they are similar enough that you can find your bearings.
Yeah, not necessarily blueprinting. They do more like traditional scripting, but definitely like just being able to navigate an engine is a similar feel in Unreal as it is to other department or other companies' own proprietary engines.
Very good. Do we have any more questions? Nope. Okay, as a final one, as a SCAD student, what is one thing that you wish you knew as a SCAD student that you want to share with the people that are about to graduate? Like a lot of people here are going to graduate next quarter. Is there something that you would have liked to know that you want to share with them now?
Yeah, basically, if you feel like you're more leaning towards something, allow yourself to just explore that. Like if you're interested in something, look it up when you have free time. I know it's hard when you're working on all your deadlines and projects, but allow yourself to be curious about different things, and it might eventually help you later on down the line. That, and don't stress so hard about how you're doing right now versus how you'll do in the future. Like, as long as you stay on things and make sure like you're safe and stable, everything's eventually going to work out if you keep at it.
Okay. Alex, same question for you.
Let's say, yeah, keep in touch with everybody that you're making friends with now, for sure. They can be a doorway into another company somewhere.
Yes, exactly. It was nice having that friend with me on Square Enix that I knew from SCAD. And later on, when I applied to Naughty Dog, a lot of the people that I made friends with in my first job were actually my foot in the door of Naughty Dog. I had 2 different testers from Square Enix go on to Naughty Dog. Oh no, 3. And then like vouch for me when I got there. So it's just nice being surrounded by people you already know. And again, they vouch for you.
Cool. Awesome. No more questions. Going once, going twice, going thrice. No, we good? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for showing up. I know it's I appreciate it. I know it's very close to like finals and stuff like that. So week 8. I know you guys are busy, so keep at it. This is all of this is going in your portfolio, and your portfolio is what will allow you to kind of like find interesting, great jobs at Naughty Dog or at Epic or any other company. So keep working hard. I will share the link to this video on YouTube as usual. Thank you so much, Victoria, for doing this. And thank you, Alex, for being there as well.
Yeah, so I saw QA and I was like, hey, I gotta check this out.
Thank you both for jumping in. And for the rest of you, if you have any remaining questions and things like that, both Victoria and Alex are on Discord. So feel free to kind of like tag them and ask your questions. The conversation doesn't have to end now. That Discord is still going to be going on next quarter and for the foreseeable future, even when we return back on the ground. I very much fell in love with my little server, so it's not going anywhere. Thank you very much, everybody. See you guys Monday. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.